Write and solve inequalities. Alright, the first thing we're going to look at is the variable signs or the inequality signs. And so this is going to be something important that you're going to want to make sure you write down. So if we look at the greater sign, when I graph the greater sign, all that's going to mean is I'm going to have an open sign. So I'm going to have an open sign for the greater than sign, but I'm also going to have an open sign for the less than sign. Okay, so if those two inequalities are going to be open signs, then if I'm going to have a greater than or equal to sign, that's going to be a closed circle, and a less than or equal to sign is also going to be a closed circle. Now this will make a little bit more sense when I show you how to graph on a number line, but just something important to make sure that you write down is what these signs are. Remember that they're open and closed, and the open ones do not have a line underneath it, and if it has an equal sign underneath it, it means that it's colored in and that it can be a part of the solution. Alright, let's look at an example. So if I have x is greater than 13, I'm going to draw out my number line, and I'm going to put 3 marks on there. And I'm going to, since 13 is my number, I'm going to use 13, but I'm also going to label 0, and then I'm going to use negative 13. So now, when I'm graphing this, the first thing that I need to remember is when I look at my inequality sign, it doesn't have a line underneath it, so it's going to be an open circle, and because it's x is greater than 13, my open circle is going to go on the 13. So now, that means that any solution above 13 is going to be a solution to this inequality to make it true. So that means I'm going to shade everything above 13, and I didn't quite make my line long enough, so I'm going to shade it in a little bit longer than that so that it gets shaded in completely. One thing to make sure that you note is when I'm doing the shading, my variable always needs to be on the left hand side so that I can just follow along with the arrows. Alright, let's take a look at another example. So in this one I'm going to do y is less than or equal to negative 5. First thing I want to do is draw out my number line, and I want to give it 3 marks. Then I always want to locate 0 in the middle. This just kind of helps to give me a guideline so I know and I have a better understanding for what numbers are going to be a part of the solution. And then I'm going to use negative 5, and I'm going to use positive 5. So now since I have negative 5 as a part of my problem, I'm going to put a closed circle on the negative 5 because I have that line underneath my inequality. So this is a less than or equal to sign. So because my everything below negative 5 based off of my inequality sign is pointing to the left, and when I say that it's pointing to the left, I mean that looks like my arrow there. So that is very similar. So now I'm just going to shade to the left, and then I'm going to make my arrow nice and big. So y is less than or equal to negative 5. All my solutions are to the left of negative 5. Let's look at another example. A is greater than or equal to negative 3. So let's draw out our line and find 0, which is going to be in the middle, and then I'm going to have negative 3 on the left and 3 on the right. So again, if you look at my arrow, so if I were to draw a line on this to make it an arrow, because my variable's on the left hand side, my arrow would go this way, so it's going to point to the right, so then that means I want to shade all the way to the right. So first of all, my inequality sign has an equal sign to it underneath, so that means it's going to be a closed circle. We're going to put that on negative 3 because that's a part of my solution, and I'm going to shade all the way to the right because that's the way my arrow is pointing, and there is my answer. Here's another example for you. So if I have 3 is going to be less than x, which is less than or equal to 10, now I have two different numbers that I need to make sure that I graph. So when I do that, I'm going to draw my graph out. Again, I'm going to put my 3 points on the line. I'm going to locate where 0 is. And now both of these numbers happen to be positive, so they're going to be to the right of 0. So I'm going to put 3 on there and 10 on there. Okay. Now the first thing I need to make sure that I do is look at my signs. And if you look at your inequality signs, x is greater than 3. So on the 3, I'm going to put an open circle. And then x is less than or equal to 10. I'm going to put a closed circle because I have that line underneath it. Okay. So now, remember in the beginning when I talked about your variable needs to be on the left-hand side. So this 3 is less than x. I'm going to rewrite that as in x is greater than 3 because essentially that's what's happening. So when I do that and I write my inequality sign, if I add this line right here, my arrow is pointing to the right. So that means I want to shade to the right of my open pink circle. But before I can do that, I want to figure out where my x is less than or equal to 10 is going to be. So I'm going to write that over. And if you notice, my variable is already on the left. And if I look at my inequality sign and I draw my line, that makes my arrow. So that's going to point to the left. So that means I'm going to shade a little bit to the left. Well, if I look at my pink, I'm going to be shading to the right. So in between both of those, I'm going to shade. So that's how you would graph two different inequalities in the same problem. Alright, and looking at this example, I have negative 2 is greater than or equal to y, which is greater than 5. So I want to draw my number line first. Put my 3 points on there. Locate where 0 would be. Negative 2 is just going to be to the left, and 5 is going to be on the right. Okay, so again, I want to write my variable on the left-hand side. So y is less than or equal to negative 2. When I do that, my inequality sign has to switch because I'm switching the letters around. So again, if I write my inequality sign down and I make my straight line, my arrow is going to point to the left. That little line underneath it, don't forget, is going to make us have a closed circle. So we're going to put a closed circle on the negative 2. And I'm going to shade a little bit in the direction of where it's going so that I know which way to kind of shade. Okay, so now let's take a look at our y is greater than 5. So when I write that all out, again, I'm going to rewrite my inequality sign. I'm going to draw my line on it to make it an arrow, and it's going to point to the right. So if I don't have that line underneath it, it's not equal, so it's going to be an open circle, which means 5 is not a part of the solution. Okay, so 5 would not make this solution true. Okay, so I'm going to shade outside anything in that direction. So I want to shade that way, and I'm going to finish it off. And then I'm also going to finish shading in the other direction. And that would be my answer for this one. Alright, I'd like for you to try and do this last example on your own. And welcome back. So now, the first thing I want to make sure that I do is I'm going to draw out my line. I'm going to make my 3 marks. And I'm going to put on there negative 25, 0, and 25. Okay, now remember, which side did I say I want the variable on? I hope you said the left side. So when I put my variable, I'm going to rewrite my variable on the left side. And because I'm doing that, my sign has to switch to the opposite direction. And then I'm going to write 25 down. Now because I do not have a line underneath it, it is an open circle on 25, and then I'm just going to shade to the left because of the way the arrow is pointing. So that would be your answer. Alright, I have a few things for you to make sure that you remember. One is to make sure that your variable is on the left-hand side. 2, is that your greater than and less than signs are going to be open circles, and 3 would be that your closed circles are going to be greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to. If you have any questions with this video, please feel free to go back and look at them.
Minnesota style. Minnesota style. Minnesota style. Minnesota style. Minnesota style. Sexy lady. Minnesota style. Sexy lady. Minnesota's nice, right? We're all about the manners. 14, so we ain't all about the manners. Have a lot of fun on the biking trails, but we always think it's dumb when the Vikings fail. Oofda, over cute. Yeah, you betcha those words are overused, and your light rail is overdue. Check the map, we're on top, we're overused. It's out of here. Joe Mauer's bat just dropped a bomb. It's like Saddam was here. These hipster jeans are all the rage. I'm glad I got a pair. The Twin Cities is where it's at. It's much more modern